Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like all the best bookshops, this podcast is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. So tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm Stacey Horan, author, book lover, and host of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This is episode number 226. For more information about this or any of our episodes, go to my website, staceyhoran.com. If you enjoy the podcast, leave us a review, like us on social media, and share us with your friends, family, and fellow readers. In today's episode of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm chatting with author Margaret Dulaney about her new middle grade book, Whippoorwill Willingly. The story follows 11-year-old Whippoorwill Willingly as she embarks on a magical journey to an enchanted lake in the Swiss Alps. She meets a variety of friends, humans, animals, and birds, and experiences a mystical world filled with wonder and healing. As a result of her journey, the once-cynical whippoorwill learns patience, empathy, and a greater appreciation for the natural world. Margaret Dulaney has been writing about mystical things for nearly 20 years. When the pandemic hit, she put aside her collection of nonfiction essays and decided to write something fun, lighthearted, and filled with hope. When she heard the voice of 11-year-old whippoorwill in her head, she couldn't resist writing this book. In this episode, I'll chat with Margaret about her writing journey, why she chose Switzerland as the setting for her story, and what it took for her to become a voracious reader and eventually write her own stories, as well as a few other things. Coming up. Margaret Dulaney, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast.
And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
I thought what we could do today is start by talking about your new book, Whippoorwill Willingly. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about this new middle grade book and what inspired you to write it.
I have been writing about mystical things for, I would say, about 20 years. I was raised by a grandmother who followed the mystical writings of Rudolf Steiner, and I was raised believing in nature spirits, in the angelic realm that oversees every life on earth. And I took, in 2020, I was writing my fourth collection of nonfiction about mysticism. And remember what happened in 2020? Something rolled across the globe that was a little trying. And I looked up from my work and I thought, I can't give my audience this. I have to lift them completely. I have to take them away to a nice health spa and give them back rubs. I needed to find some way of alleviating some of the despair around that time. So I put that project down and I sort of allowed myself to rest and wait for the next project to come. And I just started hearing this young 11-year-old girl's voice tell me her story. And it was Whippoorwill Willingly. And it was an incredible journey because I could sit down at any time during the day. And usually I'm very fussy about when I write. I have to write in the morning. I can't possibly get on the phone or look at my email or anything before I write. I'm very fussy. But anytime I sat down with a pencil in my hand, Whippoorwill would continue her story. And I really felt almost like it was dictated. And so it is a story about a young girl who is invited to visit an enchanted lake in Switzerland. She's in Switzerland anyway with her mother, attending an animal communications conference when she receives this invitation. And she very bravely goes up in the mountains, and the people she meets there, the animals, the hint toward angels that are there, the healing lake, just the whole beauty of that area in the Alps, the deep Alps, is completely healing to her. And so that's a long answer. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So, what
Okay.
was the spark? Was it this 11-year-old's voice? Did you see something? Did you hear something? Did you read something? What sort of got you started with this story?
I have always had a fantasy of meeting a group of people who are my true kindred spirits and being invited to go to a beautiful natural place. I like going to wild places, and I've been to many, but that idea of getting a wonderful, mysterious invitation to go visit your people, to find those kindred spirits that, in my case, whose hearts are as tightly wrapped around the natural world as is mine.
Hmm.
So it did come out of that fantasy, I would say.
Well, let's talk about your main character, Whippoorwill.
Mhm.
It's quite interesting that you start the book with Whippoorwill and her mother at this conference where they are advertising that they will help people learn to communicate with animals. And it's done by being in a conference center, sitting inside a room, listening to other humans talk, no
Yeah,
animals anywhere around. So,
yeah,
which I thought was quite a kind of comical comment on maybe how we learn to do things, less by
yeah.
actually doing them and more by maybe just talking about them. But let's talk about Whippoorwill and what went into creating her. What were the things that you thought were going to be important about this character?
Well, this is where it's more mysterious because I didn't consciously dream up Whippoorwill as being, she's a very sort of pragmatic, practical child. Her mother tells her that if she's not careful, she'll grow up to be a school principal. and and then give her, this very practical 11-year-old, this mystical experience where she's always questioning, and she doesn't just wholeheartedly accept what she's seeing. She Her mind is keener than that, and she's a bit of a skeptic. But I would say that I have both elements in me, though I relate much more to Whippoorwill's mother than Whippoorwill. But yeah, maybe it is two aspects of my own personality.
Let's talk about some of the other characters that Whippoorwill meets along the way. Let's start with the two-legged ones. Um, what are some, can you give us maybe insight into one or two of the other characters that she meets, other friends that she makes?
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yes, the first one she meets is Sunshine, who is an Indian woman who's come because her 6-year-old son was invited to come because he has he is blind, but he sees much more than the rest of the community sees into other realms, the realms behind what goes on on the earth. And these two are very important to her. One is a sort of mother figure. There are quite a few mother figures Even the lake itself is a mother lake. Her own mother, Whippoorwill's mother, is a single parent who is a very stable force. And here comes this other mother, a mother of a blind child, who she befriends, and they really do open one another's hearts. So I would say one of the themes that is explored is motherhood and even Mother Nature and Mother Earth.
Let's talk about some of the other characters. You mentioned the lake that features prominently in the book, but there are some, let's say, four-legged and winged characters that also
Yes.
feature prominently. And while they may not necessarily have, let's say, verbal dialogue in
Mm-hmm.
the story, there's quite a lot of communication going on. Tell us maybe
Yeah.
about one or two of these other characters.
Yes. Each character, each human two-legged character that Whippoorwill meets has a an animal that is connected to them, an animal that has featured prominently in their lives, but who are present with them at this lake. Whippoorwill has a lovely friend in a donkey who she used to visit in the park in Central Park in New York City. And this donkey is very patient with children. And she and her mother have visited this wonderful donkey for years. And Whippoorwill ends up understanding that this donkey was in her life to teach her patience because of the just this donkey exudes patience with all the little children who want to pet her, and she's in a petting zoo. And so each character has a similar animal or a similar relationship with an animal that represents something a quality that they could use some work with. In Whippoorwill's case, I suppose it's patience, but that's where the animals come in.
And let's talk a little bit about the setting, because as you mentioned, this this area that she goes to, that Whippoorwill is invited to, in your
Mm-hmm.
book, it's deep in the Alps, the Swiss Alps. Was there any hint of a real life place for you? Or did you really craft this completely from imagination?
I went to school for 2 years in Switzerland when I was a junior and senior in high school. And I loved the country. I have gone back several times, each time just thinking, my goodness, what a country. It's known to be one of the happiest countries because, it's understood that the whole country is everyone's to hike. So there are paths from, east to west, north, south. They go through people's yards, fields. You just have to, close the gate behind you. But the whole country is free for everyone to hike in. And it's just such a good program for bringing happiness to a community of people. It's wonderful. And so it was, yeah, out of sheer love of the place that I placed it there.
How much research did you end up having to do for this book? Did you find yourself having to do any research, look anything up, or were you able to just sort of write whatever you wanted?
I didn't write about any, well, I did. I did have to look up what a funeral was like in India, which is not, I'm not giving away anything, but, and I learned surprisingly that they wear white, which I thought was lovely. But other than that, no, this was more hands-on. I been to the places where it's a community, it's an international group of people. The group is small, but they come from Botswana, India, Peru, the UK, and the US.
Mm.
So I have been to all of those places, but India. I've never been to India.
Is this the sort of book you would have liked to have read as a kid? Was this the kind of book you gravitated towards when you were the age of the audience you were writing for?
Absolutely. Yeah. I know I grew up reading, loving the Narnia series. I've never stopped reading those books. And Secret Garden, one book that I absolutely love, and I dedicated the book to the writer of that book because I consider him my main squeeze, is George MacDonald's book, The Princess and the Goblin, which is probably not as well known here anymore. If you were English or Scottish, you would absolutely have read that book, but not too many Americans have probably read it. It was read more in my era. And all of these books do stress the tremendous healing power of nature.
Are these still the same kinds of stories you gravitate towards now, or do you find yourself as an adult reading other things? What do you
Hmm.
tend to reach for on the bookshelf?
I reach for books that it's, I can tell pretty early on whether it's going to be a voice that I will relate to, whoever the writer is. And I think I mainly reach for things where there is an innate goodness in the people, where I can trust that the writer is going to value what I value. And I've never stopped reading C.S. Lewis or George MacDonald. George MacDonald wrote about 50 novels and, other nonfiction. So he is my mainstay. But yeah, I think that it's innate goodness. And also I love anything about nature and the of loving nature and nature having this power to heal us.
Yeah. When
Hmm.
you were reading these books as a kid, did you want to be a writer then? Did you want to author your own books way back then?
No, not way back then.
No.
I was always a storyteller and always wanted to tell stories. So maybe I didn't believe that I was going to ever write because I was an LD kid. I had real trouble with reading and writing. So it wasn't until I could choose my own reading material and I could read very slowly that I started really reading in earnest. And that was after my schooling. And
Mm.
I started reading, I picked up Dickens and I read everything he wrote very slowly. And some of them, I have read one of his novels every decade. I've read it 6 times now. And I would say that that's what taught me how to write, that
Mm.
reading very slowly and painstakingly. Because if I didn't get a paragraph, and that can happen with Dickens, I would just make myself go over it and over it and until I could nail it.
Interesting. I know you've written in a number of genres, and I want to talk a little bit about what that's like. So your background is in theater. You've written plays. You've also written nonfiction, and now you're tackling fiction and for a middle grade audience. So I'm curious, was that a progression to try and let's say find your voice, or was it just to experiment with different types, or were you simply following like where the ideas led you?
I think looking back on it, I can see how sort of orchestrated my life was by this pull to be a storyteller. I started out in the theater because probably my love of story. And then I just thought, well, I'm not getting enough work as an actor. This is a bore. And so I started writing my own plays, and that I did for about 10 years. And then I moved to the country and I thought, well, I'm not in the theater anymore, really. I moved away from New York City. And I thought, I would really like to sort of take off the mask that I was wearing as a playwright because I would try and slip in mystical themes in my plays. Then I thought I just will just like to take off the mask and write about mysticism. And I wrote for probably 5 or 6 years essays, nonfiction. I thought, well, this is such a, I don't know where to place these. And then one day I was sitting in my backyard and I thought, hey, there's a recording studio in my backyard. My husband is a musician and a recording engineer and a producer of music. He had turned our barn into a recording studio, and I thought, I I was in the theater. I can read my own essays and just give them away online. This was way before even the word podcast had come up. And which, by the way, I love the name of your podcast.
Oh,
It's
thank you.
but anyway, so I started doing that. And that was almost 15 years ago. And I still give away one essay. It's like about a 10-minute essay a month on these themes. And then, I, because I developed people who would listen to me, a list, a following. I don't like the word following. I think it's creepy. But anyway, I had enough people listening that I could publish my own books. And so I did that. And then I think I mentioned that I was writing my fourth book when I just thought, nope, it was a return to fiction because I was a playwright.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of dialogue in Whippoorwill Willingly. So that was the progression.
Yeah. Do you think you'll tackle more fiction alongside the nonfiction you continue to write?
I don't have any idea.
Hmm.
I loved writing that. I just loved it. It was so much fun. So maybe, just to have more fun, I will. But I don't know.
Well, going wherever the wind blows you seems to have worked for you so far, right? Just going with your gut seems to be working out for you. So I guess we'll keep our fingers crossed for more fiction. I guess
Okay.
if a new idea strikes you and seems fun, that would maybe
Mhm.
entice you.
Yes.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, if people want to learn more about you,
Mhm.
your books, your spoken word essays, where can they go to find you?
My website is called Listen Well, and it's an org, so it's listenwell.org. And yeah, that has my monthly spoken word piece and many saved over the years and my information about all my books. I think there's even a play listed there, which I published. So yeah, that's the best way, listenwell.org.
Okay. And if people want to purchase a copy of Whippoorwill Willingly, can they
Hmm.
go to buy it?
Well, all the usual online, Amazon and bookshop.org. That's a good one.
Okay.
And also, if you're anywhere in New Jersey or Eastern Pennsylvania, the little bookshop in Frenchtown, New Jersey, is carrying my books now.
Excellent. Anybody in the area can find it there.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, Margaret, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast, and I want to wish you luck with Whippoorwill Willingly
Thank you.
and all the other projects that you have going on. Congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far, and best of luck with the rest of your writing journey.
Thank you. Thank you for interviewing me.
The Bookshop at the End of the Internet is a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like any good bookshop, this podcast features a wide variety of books by the equally varied and interesting authors who felt compelled to write them. This podcast gives you a chance to meet these wonderful writers and discover your next must-read book. Listen to the authors describe their books and tell you their stories in their own words. My interviews feature books from all genres and authors from all walks of life, including those who are indie published as well as those published by small presses and large publishing houses. Looking for unique, not so easy to find books for yourself, a friend, or a book club? Tune into this podcast and find your newest favorite author or maybe a soon-to-be bestseller. This podcast, like all the best bookshops, is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. Tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book. You never know what treasures you might find in the Bookshop at the End of the Internet.